Hello everybody! In today's video, I'm going to be explaining my alphabet system. Okay, this alphabet over here, as you can see, what is this alphabet? Does it mean anything? Yes, it does. Quite a lot, actually. And this alphabet right here, as you can see, it's not in, it's a particular computer order. That's basically it. But you can write it however you want. But in my writing system, in this writing system, you don't have to, as long as you get all the letters, which are only the uppercase letters, with the exception of the letter I, because I confuse it with the lowercase l, because the uppercase I doesn't have that difference in most fonts. Now, yes, there is the I with the bottom longer, line and the top line on it. Like, yes, that does exist, but for a lot of fonts and for a lot of ways of writing, that does not exist for some reason. You would think that they would add that in just because, but it's like, no. Like, no, they don't do that. And it's really confusing because you won't be able to really tell the difference between the two, Well, anyway, so I cut off all the other lowercase letters, and instead of making it, instead of making it basically 52 letters, it becomes just, 26, like actually 26, all right? Because now you can just do that. But again, in my ideal alphabet, you don't need to know any exact standard, okay? As long as you can read and write, like regardless of your accent or dialect, you can write what works for you. But basically, as long as you can read and write what you have, then it's fine, okay? As long as you can read and write this alphabet right here, you can interpret the symbols, you can interpret the letters of whatever sounds you want. Hell, if you want to, you could add in anything. And this is for all changes, okay? So anything that changes in this alphabet, anything you want to change or use, because that's what this alphabet is for. It is for anybody to use, and it is also for people who want to use the alphabet but don't have any words to, like, they might have a word to describe it, but it's like they don't want to use text-to-speech constantly because in your dialect, you might speak a certain way where they might confuse the word in with A-N-D, and, well, that's currently how it's spelled, and it will change, depending on the era, whatever, but in the future, that will be a different story, that's what I'm trying to say, so who knows? And I have that problem in my accent where they'll confuse words with words that sound vaguely similar, and so sometimes I will get words that will be searched up on the my text-to-speech, and it's written completely differently than what I actually said, because I don't know, I guess it just doesn't work. But basically, I'm making this system so that way you don't have to use text-to-speech. You don't have to use, things like that or autocorrect. You can just write however you want to write it. You can just read however you want to read it. That kind of thing. All I'm saying is the only standard that you have to go by is that when you read and write from it, you have to start from left to right to, you go from left to right to top to bottom. That's all you have to do. Start at the very top left and then just go from the top left to the top right, and then go to the next row, next row, next row, next row, until you reach the bottom. You know, a left and right, just going left and right. Because that's how English is written. You know? That kind of thing. That's the only standard that you have to go by when you write. That's the only official, like, permanent standard for English. Okay? Because English is a language family of language families, as I sometimes like to say. But I don't often say it, you know, because it's not something I often do on YouTube, particularly. But regardless, yeah, this is my alphabet. And this is how I, you know, am using it. This is how I would use it. You know, my ideal alphabet. And the K would be silent. The letter K would be silent, just to let you know, because in English we don't really have a silent letter in standard English anyway. And this is an unstandard version, but that's really just because that's kind of the whole point. It's unstandard intentionally, because if you try to make a standard, there will be these people that are like, no, but in my dialect or in my accent or in my particular way of speaking, we talk like this, so it makes everybody want to say these kind of things. You know? I don't want English to end up like Chinese, okay? I don't want them to end up like how Mandarin is, where you have a bunch of people who pretty much speak completely different languages entirely, and it constantly changes all the time. You know, a lot more than English does, and they're left behind with a writing system that is very, very outdated, you know, for modern lingo. And again, I'm trying to make this writing system in such a way where it can fit regardless of dialect or accent, so you can write it however you want, if it makes sense to you. If and when it makes sense to you in your accent, your dialect, your language, you know? And on top of that, you can write it completely based off of, you know, just what you're used to, and also if there's any major or little changes, like I said earlier in the video, you can just change it for that as well. You know, you can just adjust it anytime you want, any place, anywhere, anytime. You know, that kind of thing. With anyone, anything, you know, any way of thinking, whatever. Mental state, physical state, man, woman, religion, political worldview, anything that can make you similar or different from someone or something else, you know? And this is how I think writing should be. And I'll try to provide a link to the original video in context to this alphabet. But it's like, I'm thinking about putting this alphabet into practice. I'm thinking about taking this alphabet out there into the real world. And I'm hoping that, especially if you're somebody who has a hard time reading, or if you're just dyslexic like me, you could have a better time reading and be able to read your own reading. You know? That's all I can basically say. And that would help, especially if, you know, you're just somebody who doesn't understand certain words, or maybe, I don't know, English is probably not your first language and you're just not adjusted for certain things. You don't have to be no more, okay? Like, for the speaking part, for like the actual speaking part of English, yeah, that's something you probably have to adjust to, and there's probably standards that need to be met. But for the writing system, not really. You know, like, as long as I can truly understand what you're saying, you know, whether it's very simple and easy or complex and hard, rather wherever you are in the writing spectrum, on that scale, it doesn't really matter as much in writing, you know? But in speaking, it does matter a lot, you know? That kind of thing. And it does, and it can help a lot because, you know, you never know when, say, hey, you could become very literate because you're used to this particular way of writing, or you learn that this particular way of writing, you know? Like you move to another area and they could write completely differently, you know? Even if it's just next door, or even if it's just to the individual in some cases, or a lot of cases, you know? So, interpret that however you will, and, yeah. That's just my alphabet. Alright? But again, it's still in the early experimental stages. And I guess it's always in the experimental stages, because I guess that would be kind of the whole point. But still, you get the idea. Like, it's in early development. But this is my alphabet. Officially. Okay? Well, not really officially, but still. Anyway, I am out of here. What do you think about this alphabet? Do you have any answers, questions, ideas, thoughts, theories? I don't know. But I'm going to make a comment, and I'm going to pin myself with a comment using that writing system of my own logic in my own particular way. So, if you don't like it, if you do like it, fine. I'm just going to write it, see what happens, and leave it with that. Oh, I got a random notification. But yeah. I am out of here. Bye-bye.